safe to say we're all burned out on post-apocalyptic films. Personally, for me, I think the genre deserves a little bit more credit than they're due. Mostly because of their creativity, imagination, and the potential of having a very good post-apocalyptic film. But alas, for every post-apocalyptic masterpiece like Children of Men, Mad Max Fury Road, and District 9, we end up getting mediocre, overrated crap like The Hunger Games, or more young adult novel pish posh like The Fifth Wave, Divergent, or disappointing sludge fest like every Kevin Costner movie from The Postman to Waterworld. Here's the problem. The problem isn't the fact that we have all seen them before, so they're gonna be the same every single time we watch them. The problem is we get these interesting ideas for a very excellent post-apocalyptic film, but as soon as the filmmakers try to take that concept, they have no idea exactly what to do with them. Thus, we get something like the Resident Evil movies, particularly the last one, where they just practically give up on the storytelling department and just say, who cares about continuity, consistency, and logic? As long as we got action, as long as we have things like aliens, zombies, or just any other enemy that is attacking our protagonist, the movie-going audience will love it regardless. Personally, for me, I hate that crap. But thankfully enough, we got a new post-apocalyptic movie coming out this year, and that goes by the name of Captive State. A post-apocalyptic dystopian thriller that is directed by Rupert Wyatt, who has directed one of the greatest movies I have ever seen in my life, and nothing else worth mentioning. So, with that being said, let's figure out if Captive State is really worth the wait, or if we're gonna still have to keep waiting for the next Mad Max movie. If only. In the movie Captive State, it takes place in the walled-off city of Chicago, whereas an alien race that has only been notified as the legislators invade and conquer Earth, particularly in the city of Chicago, basically telling the United States government, you know, you can keep your little civilized United States government and everything will be cool with us, we'll make peace. However, you're gonna have to give supreme rule to our race. And from that point on, for years on end, the city is divided into two individual factions. Those who are willing to submit to the aliens' power like the corrupted government, the military, and the somewhat civilian peacekeepers, and those who are willing to fight back in the form of a rebellion organization known as the Phoenix. The main characters who somewhat drive the plot forward are our two protagonists, John Goodman, who is a run-down Chicago police officer, and Ashton Sanders from Moonlight, who is a young street hustler who is trying to escape the corrupted city of Chicago with the people he loves. From that angle alone, that sounds like an interesting concept. An alien race that is taking over the entirety of a city like Chicago? That can be somewhat thrilling for audiences. But the problem is with Captive State is that execution really matters for this movie. However, in the case of Captive State, that doesn't quite necessarily make it a bad movie. It's a fairly competent and decent dystopian movie, but personally for me, the movie feels like if District 9 and Detroit, not the movie, not the city, but the video game by David Cage, had a very decent but disappointing grandchild. Does the movie have its somewhat redeeming factors? Absolutely. The movie itself is particularly well acted, especially from our two leading characters, one by John Goodman and the other by Ashton Sanders. John Goodman is fairly excellent in any other movie he's playing in, as long as he's not really underacting it like he's the next Tommy Lee Jones or something. But as far as acting is concerned, he really does a great job at selling you his performance of being a cop who's experiencing very dangerous stuff when the aliens arrive, and how he's trying to keep everything in control, as well as him having confrontations and discussions with the next actor that we see in the movie, played by Ashton Sanders. Ashton Sanders also plays his character perfectly well, as he has done in previous movies like Moonlight. He plays his character in such a way where he feels like he has nothing to lose, and he feels like he's being caught in the middle of everything. In fairness, I think the movie would have benefited more if the movie just focused on his character. But we'll get to those problems afterwards. Another thing that I can also accommodate Captive State for is having very excellent cinematography. Not to the extent of shooting something like, I don't know, Roger Deakins or Emmanuel Lubensky, but to the extent of Rupert Wyatt's direction that make the cinematography so much more majestic. There is a shot where Ashton Sanders is looking at like these satellites, or even like the spaceships that the aliens are inhabited in. From the scale to the somewhat range and cinematography of it all, that's good enough. But combine it with the tone and the color palette, making it all gray and drearily like something out of The Road. In all honesty, it works. And speaking of works, there are multiple cool elements that go into the soundtrack, especially in soundtrack elements towards the end of the movie, where it basically gives you this chilling, impactful score that basically reminded me something of Benjamin Wallfish's score for Blade Runner 2049. Captive State, while it does deal with its passable technological aspects along with its performances, doesn't necessarily get away with the flaws that it inhabits. While I did say that the performances are very well acted in the movie from the supporting cast, cast, and even our main characters, I would have loved it more if the film gave me a character to care about. Because as far as the young street hustler, or the police officer, or the rebellion of the Phoenix, or the corrupt politicians, and even the alien race, there's not a single character in this movie that doesn't have any defining dimension or attribute. Most of the characters are simply superficial. In fact, there's not a single character's name that you remember. Like, I completely forgot who one character who was played by Machine Gun Kelly's name was. Why is this character so important to the plot? Why is he friend with Ashton Sanders? Same thing applies to Vera Farmiga. Is there anything that can make us connect with this character, other than just acting like a piece of the puzzle for the plot to move forward? But ultimately, the biggest problem I have with this movie is the screenplay. It doesn't resonate well with audiences in terms of characters, world building, or story on an emotional level. This unnecessarily convoluted and linear plot is just there just to move the pieces forward just so we can get to the ending credits, rather than establishing something like characters. Like, why do we relate to these people? Why are they in the situation that they're in? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What are their goals? What are their character arcs? World building. Are there cities outside of Chicago that are dealing with this exact situation? Are there states in the United States that are also being invaded by these aliens? Heck, what are things like outside of North America? And the story. What makes it better than any other alien or dystopian post-apocalyptic movie that we have seen before? What makes it stand out to the rest of the crowd? The thing is, we could have gotten most of that if the middle act didn't take so much time off of this movie. Here's the problem. The movie basically sets up the situations and circumstances that are probably gonna make the movie surprising, and you see the main characters finally get themselves into a pickle, and what does it amount to? A merely tiresome sequence of events where the main characters get shoved to the sidelines in order to explain a convoluted plan that is going on just to attempt to assassinate a president. It's like this entire scene where one person sends another person to do this job, and then that goes person to another person, and it goes to another person, and another, all the way until the final plan is put into action. The thing is, I can agree with that sequence being particularly cool, and as far as I'm concerned, is probably the highlight of the movie. Better yet, this movie could have been served as like a short film, and it would have been a much better short film than Skin. But what's mostly frustrating about it is that it takes up most of the movie and you don't care about any of these characters. So you see these characters move along doing their convoluted plan that by the time you see one of the main characters like Ashton Sanders, you're kind of like, wow, I completely forgot he was even in the movie. And in terms of visual effects, it's fairly decent. The legislators do have a particularly cool looking design, basically looking like a walking pincushion. But at some points you would see effects like the ship and the drones, which at first look fairly convincing at close range. But when you see it from far away distances or in some sequences, it is fairly kinda hard to buy. But the one thing that people do have a problem with is the twist ending. And to be perfectly honest, it is one of those twist endings that you can easily coming a mile away from the second act kicks in. Overall, guys, Captive State is not necessarily a bad film by any stretch of the imagination, but it is yet another post-apocalyptic movie that tries to be better than it is, but yet failing as a result. You have well-acted performances, extraordinary cinematography at some certain sections. The soundtrack has its very cool elements hidden in there, but the screenplay doesn't resonate well on an emotional level in terms of characters, story, and world building. The middle act's pacing takes up most of the movie. The characters don't have any kind of dimension or defining attribute, along with visual effects that are for the most part a little bit hit or miss, and a twist ending that is just somewhat predictable. Captive State for me gets a 2.5 out of 5. I was really looking forward to this movie, and I was quite curious at the same time because Rupert Wyatt is behind the director's chair. But when all is said and done, this dystopian thriller is just mediocre, wasted potential. Alright guys, so that is my review of Captive State. Comment below, let me know what you thought about the movie. Find me on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and find me on Xbox if you're in the gaming mood. And also, if you would like to see more movie reviews like this, be sure to subscribe for more. My name is Luke Nukem, and you, my friends, have been blown away.